Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ash.
Good morning, Steve. Hi, everyone.
Quite a room here. I feel like the burden of history and a lot of responsibility to be serious, but we can just have fun.
Of course,
okay,
yes.
Right, okay. So, Ash, this is a great way to kick off this conference. You've had a substantial career in HR, including at Aramark, just down the street, which is basically ubiquitous in everywhere. So what is the biggest change that you've found in your career so far as a top HR person?
Yeah, it's interesting. We were joking this morning while we were getting coffee that the only people who talk about HR as kind of the policy police are the HR people who talk about it and stand-up comedians, right? I think most organizations truly understand that HR is a strategic function. And I think about it from two perspectives, right? So at minimum, I think the less sophisticated amongst the organizations out there understand that if nothing else, labor cost is such a critical item in how you think about your cost structure, so they want to manage talent and labor. But I think the more progressive organizations, and hopefully the ones that many of you here represent, are really thinking about human capital. When you fully leverage the potential of your human capital, it truly makes a difference between your performance of the company from being good to being great. And so I really do think that has been a shift. And so HR then, our function as stewards of human capital, play a pivotal role in an organization's success. And I'll say that how people view HR leaders has shifted along with the ability to kind of see talent as a strategic lever. Because, I'll give you an example from my own career. My first C-suite role was not as a CHRO. It was leading the ESG strategy for my last organization. Mm-hmm. And so I was spending time with the investors of the world, the BlackRocks of the world, and talking about our commitments around our goals around climate and sustainability and diversity and governance issues, right? So I think you take Chanel, Lena Nair, who was the CHRO and was made the CEO. In our own backyard here in Philadelphia, Independence Blue Cross had a CHRO, Joe Frick, who was made the CEO of the organization, led that organization successfully for a number of years before moving on to be in the board of directors. So I think HR is a function whose time has truly come. The pandemic was certainly a time when people suddenly sat back and realized the criticality of HR leadership within the organization. But if you think about it now from the post-pandemic lens, we heard our opening speaker speak to the issues around hybrid workplaces and what's going on with the digital revolution and what do you do with AI as it's coming into the workplace. All of that sits squarely in our laps as HR leaders to kind of steward organizations through. And I think that's a big change.
Tremendously influential. Well, now tell us a little bit about your own company, AmeriHealth Caritas, which is operating in 13 states. It's a managed care organization, but it's got a particular focus on the disadvantaged, right? And I was just wondering how that informs your sense of purpose and in terms of your frontline workers and others.
Yeah, so a little bit of history for those of you who don't know who AmeriHealth Caritas is. So we are, to your point, a managed care organization. We are a $24 billion, over 9,000 associates across 13 states and the District of Columbia. And we are primarily so if you think about Medicaid, Medicare for dual eligible populations, so we have a healthcare, a market product, so an exchange product. We have a pharmacy benefits product, and we have a behavioral health line of business. So we really take care of over 4 million of the most disadvantaged Americans, very often at the time of their most critical need. So when you think about mission, it is not just something that's on a piece of paper. This is an organization where every single employee lives the mission every single day. It's because you're, again, serving these people. Think about it, right? If you or I need medical care, we can take 30 minutes between meetings, between calls, go outside and make a call to our insurance company or our doctors and get the care we need. We're talking about people who very often are working 2 jobs to put food on the table. And so for them, when they are calling at a time of need from a healthcare perspective, it's coming when they really need an organization that understands why being in support of that member's need is central to the mission. So at a time where coming out of the pandemic, organizations were looking for purpose as a way to motivate employees, AmeriHealth Caritas has mission in spades, and that's been central. And so if you think about, you asked the question around our frontline employees, so our teams are working with members either sort of in a call center environment where they're responding to member questions about the access to care issues they're dealing with, but very often they're in communities. They're actually case managers or care managers who are working through sort of access to care issues. And for those of you who are in the healthcare industry, but even if you're not, you know this just from reading the literature. I mean, actual healthcare is very often just the tip of the spear, right? What brings care outcomes to our members is a whole bunch of socioeconomic issues that are well outside of healthcare. So it's issues like, what is going on in terms of, do they have secure housing? Do they have transportation to make it to a doctor's appointment? So our care providers, our frontline teams really do think about the whole person experience of our member and how we serve our mission in terms of helping them get the care they need.
So some of those folks need to have like almost encyclopedic knowledge of all the different situations you can have, but then some authority or autonomy then to help make decisions around an individual's billing and so on?
Yeah, that's a really good, it's an astute observation, Steve. I think that's true. And I think, that's why I think when we think about bringing in team members and training them and giving them all the information they need, technology is hugely helpful, of course, but we spend and invest a lot of time upskilling our associates and making sure that they are ready and prepared to be responsive to member needs no matter what is going on in the environments that they're serving in.
So now, the thing we're hearing, besides having a sense of mission that motivates people, the company, like so many other organizations, is needing to focus on efficiency and productivity, and how do you hold people accountable while even supporting them? That's a balance, right?
Yeah, and I'm sure many of you sort of struggle with this question as well, right? And I think one of the things that we've been spending the last couple of years really talking about is this idea of performance powering purpose. So there's often this tension, this inherent tension, especially in mission-oriented, mission-focused organizations around sort of margin versus mission. And a lot of the work we have been doing is really around making sure we're connecting the dots for our associates between performance and the ability to further our mission through performance. And so how do you do that? You do that through an ultimate degree of transparency. You have to treat your associates like they are shareholders. And so the conversations we have, for instance, in our quarterly town halls, which good 75 to 80% of our associates attend, they're virtual, has been sort of transparently talking about what is going on in the marketplace, not just what's happening within our four walls, but what's happening in the competitive marketplace, what's going on in terms of legislation, what's going on in terms of policy, helping them understand what's going on in terms of performance of the organization. Because when you do that, and you do that transparently, what happens is connecting the dots between the work that each of our associates do to the organization's outcomes and its sort of strategic sort of direction becomes way easier, right? And people need to see themselves in the outcomes of the organization. So connecting the dots has been hugely helpful. We've reframed our sort of the how of work in terms of a behavioral framework and made it super, super simple to say, to us, great leadership looks like being intentional, being inclusive, and being inspirational, and we've defined what that means. And so we've tried to, through multiple sort of both structural and communication channels, to make sure that every single individual in the organization can draw a straight line between the work they do every day and the outcomes our members face and ultimately the success of the organization.
So you hold them accountable, and at the same time, you're kind of accountable to workers too, who expect support. And during the pandemic and afterwards, companies were bending over backwards to offer new things to their workers. But that hasn't completely gone away. So you've told me about some things you're doing that actually move the ball further down the field. Yeah,
I mean, it's interesting. So, there's a ton of literature and a ton of studies out there in terms of sort of the employee experience being directly correlated to customer experience, and it's certainly true in our space. So I talked a little bit earlier about how our associates think about our members in terms of whole person care. We think about our associates in the same way. We think about the whole person when it comes to our employees and how we are looking at not just sort of what very often you think about in terms of sort of their physical well-being, benefits and cetera, but really thinking about their emotional needs and their financial needs. So we extend, we think about, so for instance, coming out of the pandemic, we implemented, I think the team from Lyra is here, we implemented Lyra because we had a lot of employees talk about how they couldn't find therapists for either for their own needs or for their children very often. And so we implemented a program which affords, 12 free counseling sessions, not just for our employees, but for their families as well. We have programs around wellness, which extend beyond. So we have our headquarters in Newtown Square, where we have a state-of-the-art gym. But if you're not in the building, how we making sure you have access to what you need from a fitness perspective. So we have an app that helps our associates with personal coaching, fitness coaching. We have nutritional counseling. We have Sleepio, which is around sleep health and making sure that our employees are truly, taking advantage of all of the services that we have and thinking about the whole person care. When we think about things like how people grow their families, I mean, we have a employee population. This is actually not super rare in healthcare, but we have almost 70% of our associates are women. And so we think about things like not just the usual standard things like parental leave and making sure that we have maternal care benefits, but we want to help people grow their families however they grow their families. So we have surrogacy benefits and adoption benefits. And so really thinking about financial well-being, thinking about how are you planning for your retirement? How do we provide education on preparing for the future from a financial perspective? So we really do try to take a 360 view of everything that impacts a person's well-being. Similarly, I think internally, recognition. We have a platform for recognition that allows not just monetary recognition, but allows for social recognition. There's actually a really interesting piece of research that Gallup put out a couple of weeks ago about recognition at work actually mitigating the impact of loneliness, which many people say is sort of the silent pandemic of our times, And so we really do try to not just address the needs that are present, but the emerging needs of our employee population through a full suite of opportunities.
It does seem, I like the sound of it, it does seem like a modern thing now to have recognition that's not just from the boss down, it's peer-to-peer, you can even praise your boss, it can go in any direction, and then others can join in, and that creates a kind of a nice...
Well, it makes for a much more authentic recognition experience, right? It's not a check-in-the-box activity. It's like, I worked with this person in another team that I don't interact with all the time, but she was incredibly helpful, and I just want to publicly acknowledge her. And there is the power in that, and it's sort of viral. I love when people kind of like, I'll have a shout out to someone and people will go in there and either put a little heart emoji or add their own comments. And I absolutely love that it becomes a conversation.
It's not corny at all.
Not corny at all. And I'm fine with being corny, by the way. So, but yes, it's not.
Now, big topic. Companies in all industries are responding to the backlash against DEI that comes in all different shapes and forms, of course. What is your approach to the sort of the basic principles of it? How's it part of the fabric of the company and right now?
You can't hear about sort of the people we serve every day without thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion just being woven into the fabric of the company to us. It sounds like such a cliche, but it's not something we do. It's just how we do everything we do just by virtue of the 4 million Americans who are most disadvantaged that we are serving every day. And we think about it both from an internal perspective and an external perspective. So certainly there are programs around sort of leadership and education around diversity. Our associate resource groups are very active and have a lot of programming that a lot of our associates participate in at a level that I find is pretty market leading because, again, it's so important to the members we serve. But we also, what's fascinating is every conversation we have around equity, you bring in health equity into the picture, which clearly we have a role to play in the business that we are in. 2 weeks ago, for instance, I hosted a conversation with state representatives and experts from our population health group talking about sort of the disparity in maternal care and what communities of color see in terms of even maternal death rates, right? So that is interesting not only to the people who are within the four walls of this organization, but they know it has impact on the members they serve. They go back to their work a little bit more aware of things they should be watching out for or supporting our members through. So to us, diversity, equity, and inclusion is part of the fabric of the organization, and it is, part of the strategic vision for the organization based on, again, the communities that we are in service of every day.
We'll be coming back to the topic at the end of the day with another fireside chat with a professor from Wharton who does like real research on the data and what that shows, which is that it's good for business to embrace
100%.
some of these principles.
Yeah.
I want to ask you, if for our audience here who are involved in people management, is there one tip or takeaway that you've gathered from like the last few tumultuous years that you might share with the crowd?
I will not claim to be wise enough to offer you guys a tip, but I will maybe use it as an opportunity for self-disclosure, if that's okay.
Yeah.
One of the things that I kind of self-coach myself around is sort of balancing conviction and certitude with curiosity. So, we are considered the experts in what we do. People come to us for advice. People expect for us to have experience, knowledge, et cetera, that we bring to bear on every question that comes our way. And so sort of having conviction is an easy go-get. The piece that we need, though, is curiosity, right? Because I think when you kind of try to have equal parts of both, then curiosity opens up opportunities for creative new ideas. It's a place where inspiration comes from. It's a place where innovation comes from. And I think HR as a function has really shown up, in a way. We had to be creative. We had no choice, in the middle of a pandemic. But I think if we can kind of bring that approach of balancing, certitude and conviction with curiosity to everything we look at, and God knows you guys will have the rest of today to experiment with that idea, but I do think that offers up a way to open up the aperture of the impact we can have as HR leaders.
Mm-hmm. Well, it starts with curiosity and then listening, right?
Yes.
So it's we talk about so much about in the new world of AI with prompts, but there's human prompts too, like, what are you thinking? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Well, that time went by so fast, Ash.
It was a conversation, as you said.
Yes, great to have you here. Thanks for helping us kick things off. We'll go on to a panel conversation.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.